She's a health science assistant clinical professor of pediatrics at UCR. She has completed a fellowship in general pediatrics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and she is board certified in pediatrics by the American Board of Pediatrics. Please welcome Dr. McGowan.
I am vertically challenged, so I will try and move around, but not too much because I need the screen. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Can you hear me? I usually talk. Okay, perfect. I do need a mic because my voice is not that loud. I will not introduce myself. I am going to try and make this somewhat interactive and break it up with a little video, a few videos, but I look forward to the question and answer at the end. So I will get started. Or maybe, let's see. Perfect. Okay, so just to give a brief background of what I'll be talking about, we will be discussing the developing brain and talking about the developing brain and stress. Then we'll pivot into stress and adverse childhood experiences and what those are. What is mental health? Mental health in US children, and then we'll look at Riverside County briefly. And then we'll talk about resilience and what we can do to build resilience in our children. So the developing brain, a child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide a basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determine whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. So during childhood, which is such an important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits, pathways that become the basic foundation of the brain and how it works. Circuits and connections are forming and growing at a rapid pace, and the circuits that are used the most often are reinforced and made stronger. So the more you use it, the more you practice a hobby, the stronger it becomes, and it becomes automatic. We often think of it as muscle memory. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get the most use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent, like learning to talk, walk, and ride a bike. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through normal process called pruning. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later, like riding a bike with your training wheels first, and then getting the training wheels off. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavior, behavioral control, logic, language, memory during early and critical periods of development. So well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neuron signals to travel across regions of the brain, with repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in a specific area of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. So basically how in school you learn foundational math and then it builds on that. It's the same concept. The basic lessons that you learn as a baby build on each other. So like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for what we learn and what comes later. So the key to forming pathways is what is known as serve and return interactions with adults. New neural or brain connections form in young children when they serve. So a baby will babble and will talk to you, and we automatically babble back and make the facial expressions and make the hand gestures. And that back and forth is very reinforcing in how they learn language and how they learn how to interact with the outside world. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will build. It helps create neuronal connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need for life. So when you're talking to a baby, you automatically smile and hello and like your octaves go a little bit higher in your voice, and you use more inflection, and you are teaching more positive reinforcement. And automatically, when we are unhappy, our voices drop and we're like, no, don't do that. So we're reinforcing and teaching these patterns. So I'd just like to point out to be very mindful when we're talking to our little ones. So there is good stress and toxic stress. Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go into alert. There's an adrenaline rush, an increased heart rate, and increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or young child receives some support from a caring adult, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. That is what should happen. In severe situations, however, such as ongoing abuse or neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. When there is no apparent even when there is no apparent physical harm, the stress response is still on, and the extended absence of a response from an adult will cause what we know as toxic stress. Constant activation of stress response overloads developing systems with serious lifelong consequences for the child. So while stress is not a mental health disorder, it is important to talk about stress because it can take a toll. Stress is a feeling of mental and physical tension. Stress is the body's response to a threat, pressure, or challenge. We can often feel stressed when we are angry, nervous, or upset, and it can come in short bursts or last for a long time. Feeling stress is normal. It can help us, like when we need to run from danger or when we need to meet a deadline for a due date of some kind, but it can also hurt us when the stress is too much and for too long. So stress in children can be caused by adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences are traumatic events of childhood. These were traditionally researched, and we identified abuse, neglect, and areas of household dysfunction. So that means being part of a home where there is divorce, or there is a parent or caregiver with mental health, or there is some kind of substance abuse in the home. Expanded ACEs have also been identified, and these include witnessing violence, exposure to unsafe neighborhoods, racism, discrimination, bullying, or even engagement in the foster care system. Oh, sorry. Oh, let's see. Okay, there we go. It is estimated that about 46 to 54% of children ages 0 to 17 years have experienced at least one ACE. Youth exposed to a single ACE have been found to be 80% increased risk of being exposed to additional ACEs. ACEs affect physical and mental health, and it's been proven that exposure to multiple ACEs, including 4 or more ACEs, significantly associated with negative both physical and mental health outcomes. So we'll talk about stress, ACEs, and then what this means for mental health. Mental health is a broad label that encompasses a range of mental health mental, emotional, social, and behavioral functioning. Mental health, like physical health, occurs along a continuum from good to poor and varies over time in different conditions and at different ages. Good mental health in children includes indicators such as timely achievement of a developmental milestone, healthy social and emotional challenges and development, and effective regulatory and coping skills. Mentally healthy children function well in various settings, including at home, at school, and in the community. Poor mental health and patterns of symptoms that are severe and persistent and cause impairment or dysfunction can develop into a mental disorder. So mental disorders, defined by what we doctors call the DSM-5, are clinically significant cognitive, emotional, irregulation, or behavioral disturbances that reflect dysfunction in physiological, biological, or developmental function processes. So what that means is it moves past from just being a stressor that you can get over and is now causing differences in how you interact with the world. It causes impairment in how you interact with family members, with friends, with school, and with your environment. Common mental health disorders in children include anxiety, depression, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and behavioral disorders. Good mental health is not simply the absence of mental disorder. So persons with a diagnosed mental health disorder can still have good mental health if receiving the adequate treatment and support. One of the diagnoses that I talked about was depression, and we're going to discuss what this looks like. So occasionally being sad or feeling hopeless is part of every child's life. However, some children feel sad or uninterested in things that they used to enjoy, or feel helpless or hopeless in situations that they are not able to change. When children feel persistent sadness and hopelessness, they may be diagnosed with depression. So examples of behaviors often seen in children with depression include feeling sad, hopeless, or irritable, not wanting to do or enjoying things that they used to find fun, showing changes in eating patterns, so that can be eating too much or eating too little. Changes in sleep pattern, and again, that can be sleeping a lot more or a lot less than is normal. Showing changes in energy, so being tired and sluggish or tense and restless a lot of the time. Having a hard time paying attention. Feeling worthless and useless or guilty. And then showing self-injury or self-destructive behavior. Extreme depression can lead a child to think about suicide or plan for suicide. For youth aged 10 to 24 years, suicide is among the leading causes of death. Some children may not talk about their hopelessness or their hopeless thoughts and may not appear sad. Depression might also cause a child to make trouble or act up or be unmotivated, causing others to not notice that the child is actually depressed and incorrectly label them as being a troublemaker or being lazy. So moving on to anxiety and what that could look like. When a child does not outgrow the fears and worries that are typical in young children, or when there are so many fears and worries that they interfere with school, home, or play activities, the child may be diagnosed with anxiety. Examples of the different types of anxiety disorders include being afraid when away from the parents. So it is normal in the beginning for a child to have a little bit of separation anxiety. But again, it is normal for them to outgrow this because they realize that the parents are always there. There's always a positive reinforcement. So I'll take it back to remember when I described the serve and respond. So when a child is first exploring the world, they will look around them and with the parents standing next to them. They will walk forward a few steps and take a look back, make sure that the caregiver is still there, and then walk a little further. And if there's a toy far away, they'll look at you and they'll look at the toy and then look at you and then look at the toy, and they go and grab the toy and then they make sure that you're there. But they explore, they have the confidence to explore further and further away from you. That is normal. What then becomes a disorder is when they never lose that ability to go out and explore because they don't want to ever lose sight of you. And usually something happens to trigger that. Another thing is having extreme fear about specific things or situations such as dogs, insects, or going to the doctor and phobias. And that's not just going to the doctor because you know that you're going to get shots, but there is a significant heightened response to the thought of going to a doctor. Also, being afraid of school or other places where there are a lot of people, and that is known as social anxiety. Being very worried about the future and about bad things happening, that's general anxiety. having repeated episodes of sudden, unexpected, intense fear that come with symptoms like heart pounding, having trouble breathing, or feeling dizzy, shaky, and sweaty. And that is typical of a panic disorder. So anxiety may present as fear or worry, but can also make children irritable and angry. Anxiety symptoms can also include trouble sleeping, as well as physical symptoms like fatigue, headaches, and stomach aches. Some anxious children keep their worries to themselves, and thus the symptoms can be missed. So for ADHD, while some behaviors linked to ADHD are normal, someone with ADHD will have trouble with these areas, and again will affect their normal everyday functioning. So signs of inattention, such as getting easily distracted, and maybe they can't complete a task that they were supposed to at school, or completing their homework without doing 10 other things at the same time. Getting bored with a task very quickly, and trouble focusing and finishing a single task. Signs of hyperactivity include having a hard time sitting still, having a hard time doing quiet tasks or activities, and signs of impulsivity, so impatience, having a hard time taking turns and interrupting others. And again, so these it depends on the spectrum. It can start off as being normal, but having these affecting your daily life is when it becomes pathological. Finally, behavioral disorders. Children sometimes argue and are aggressive or act angry or defiant around adults. A behavioral disorder may be diagnosed when these disruptive behaviors are uncommon for children, for a child's age, and persist over time or are severe. Because disruptive behavior disorders involve acting out and showing unwanted behaviors towards others, these are sometimes called externalizing behaviors. So these include examples of behavioral disorders are oppositional defiant disorder. And this can look like often angry or losing one's temper, often arguing with adults and refusing to comply with adults' rules or requests, often resentful or spiteful, deliberately annoying others or becoming annoyed with others, often blaming others for one's own mistakes and behaviors. And then there is conduct disorder. This looks like breaking serious rules such as running away, staying out all night when told not to, or skipping school. Being aggressive in a way that causes harm, such as bullying, fighting, being cruel to animals, lying, stealing, or damaging other people's property on purpose. So mental health disorders in the US. So let us bring it all home. We kind of talked about a little bit of background. ADHD, anxiety problems, behavioral problems, and depression are the most commonly diagnosed mental health disorders in children. Estimates for ever having a diagnosis among children aged 3 to 17 in a survey that was conducted between 2016 and 2019 are discussed here. So ADHD was diagnosed in about 9.8% of children. That's 6 million children. Anxiety in 9.4%, that is approximately 5.8 million children. Behavioral problems, 8.9, which is 5.5 million children. Depression, 4.4, but that's 2.7 million. I would like to point out that all those numbers were pre-COVID and pre-pandemic, and all the current studies that are being conducted show that those numbers have increased. So some of these, so mental health disorders in the children, some of these conditions commonly occur together. For example, among children aged 3 to 17 years, in 2016, having another mental health disorder was most common in children with depression. So about 3 in 4 children with depression also had anxiety, and about 1 in 2 had a behavioral problem. For children with anxiety, more than 1 in 3 also had behavioral problems, and about 1 in 3 also had depression. For children with behavioral problems, 1 in 3 also had anxiety, and 1 in 5 also had depression. Furthermore, depression and anxiety tend to increase incidence over time. So for adolescents, depression, substance use, and suicide are important concerns. Among adolescents aged 12 to 17 years, in the 2018-2019 survey, just highlight a few. 1.6% had an alcohol use disorder. 3.2% had an illicit drug use disorder. And 18.8% seriously considered attempting suicide. Mental health, behavioral, and developmental disorders begin early in life. 1 in 6 children aged 2 to 8 years have a mental health, behavioral, or developmental disorder. Prevalence of mental health disorders change with age. So the diagnoses of ADHD, anxiety, and depression become more common with increased age. Behavioral problems are more common among children 6 to 11 years of age. Okay, so mental health disorders in Riverside County. So this is just a brief synopsis, and this was in 2021. We had a total of almost 588,000 children between the ages of 0 and 17 living in the area. Key findings amongst teens show that teen births for females are 15 to 19 and decreased 50% over 2016. But what this map shows is that, again, we see that there are high rates of, or increasing rates of birth and tobacco use amongst our youth. Teen suicide in the region is also up trending, especially in the Coachella and Southwest. And this shows a comparison of the number of teens, teen ideation attempts and suicides by gender or sex in 2018 and 2021 in the Riverside County. And so we see that males had more completed suicides and females had more attempts. So mental health disorder in the Riverside County. The Southwest region was the only region in the county that showed an increase in attempted suicide every year from 2018 to 2021. 30% of 11th graders experienced homelessness in Riverside County and considered suicide, and this was between 2017 and 2019. This was 4% compared to 4% in the state of California. 40% of children part of the LGBTQ plus in the 9th grade considered suicide in the past 12 months when they were asked during the 2017 and 2019 period. Teen females had over 2 times the number of suicide attempts, and teen males had nearly 3 times more suicides than females. Persons of Asian descent make up 6% of the Riverside County population, and yet they accounted for 15% of all suicides deaths from 2018 to 2021. Okay, so it is not all just gloom and doom. What can we do about it? I am going to pivot a little bit and talk about resilience. And I'll start with a brief video.
Why do some people do well despite serious hardships? The science of resilience can help us find answers.
We define resilience as a good outcome in the face of adversity. The extent to which we can build capacities in all children early in their lives to be able to deal with whatever bumps in the road or major obstacles may be coming down the track. That's an investment in building strong human capital and healthy, productive adults.
Some children face more obstacles and adversity than others.
It's like having a parent with a major mental illness, growing up in a very socioeconomically disadvantaged community, going to schools that are not good, being exposed to violence in the neighborhood or in the home.
But some children do well despite these significant obstacles.
Resilience is that ability or set of capacities for positive adaptation, allowing you to keep in balance.
We're talking about the kinds of capacities and skills and the abilities that give people a sense of mastery and management of difficulty.
It's tempting to think about children as either having this resilient quality or not, but resilience is built over time, just as and in parallel with how the architecture of the brain is built over time.
It's not just in the person, it's in the interaction between the person and the environment.
So we care about resilience for the same reason that we care about promoting healthy development, because in many respects it is the same. We are interested in promoting resilience in children so that, despite the odds, more and more children can grow up to be productive citizens.
So, despite exposure to ACEs, most children and adolescents do not develop these poor health outcomes. This is based on the premise that various environmental and intrinsic factors moderate the effect of ACEs on a lifelong health course. So the definition of resilience is the ability to adapt successfully to disturbances that threaten your development. It's your ability to bounce back. It's not that you're never going to face hardships. It's facing hardships and you bend a little, but you don't break. So we'll briefly show one more video, and then we will talk about what we can do to build resilience in our kids.
Resilience is not some magical quality. It's something that really can be built, even in difficult circumstances.
A key active core ingredient to building resilience are the relationships kids have to others who care about them.
Of course, families play a very important role, but nobody raises children in isolation. We have a huge amount of research to show the powerful impacts of teachers, coaches, other adults in the community with whom children have a chance to develop relationships, who play that critical supportive role of building resilience. As a result of responsive interaction, children build simple skills of coping and adapting. How to stop crying, how to regulate your behavior, being able to defer gratification.
You have an adaptive toolkit that allows you at moments of stress or challenge to bring out a number of potential skills that allow you to get through it.
As children get older, the sophistication of those skills increases. Being able to monitor situations, solve problems. The way we as a society can nurture the development of resilience is to help communities to pay more attention to building the capabilities of the adults who care for children and provide the supports they need to tip the scales toward more positive life outcomes.
And then when communities say, we want to be an active part of crafting the solution to really understand what's necessary to produce the resilience, that's when the ball gets rolling.
Resilience building, capacity building, is really in everyone's interest, and everyone reaps the benefits when we do that well.
So I will give you 10 active things that you can do to help build resilience for yourself and also for the children around you. Resilience needs relationships, not uncompromising independence. So research tells us that it's not rugged self-reliance, self-determination, or inner strength that leads kids through adversity, but the reliable presence of at least one supportive relationship. In the context of a loving relationship with a caring adult, children have the opportunity to develop vital coping skills. The presence of a responsive adult can also help reverse physiological changes that are activated by stress. This will ensure that the developing brain, body, and immune system are protected from the damaging effects of these physiological changes. Anyone in the life of a child can make a difference. Family, teachers, coaches, anyone. Increasing their exposure to people who care about them is the next one, sorry. So one thing I did want to mention is your relationship with a child will vary based on their age. They'll go from needing you and relying on you when they're younger to maybe asserting their independence when they become adolescents because they're trying to figure out who they are. That is normal. The research is still shows that if they can trust you with the hard decisions, where I want to go for college, do I really want to do this? Having those conversations is planting a seed and reinforcing. They just need that one person who knows is going to be there and has their back. And that is very strong in building resilience. So increasing their exposure to people who care about them. Social support is associated with higher positive emotions, a sense of personal control and predictability, self-esteem, motivation, optimism, and resilience. Kids won't always notice the people who are in their corner cheering them on. So when you can, let them know about the people in their fan club. Anything you can do to build their connection with the people who love them will be helpful and will help strengthen them. So for example is, I told grandma how brave you are. She is so proud of you. So let them know that it's okay to ask for help. Children will often have the idea that being brave is about dealing with things by themselves. Let them know that being brave and strong means knowing when to ask for help. If there is anything they can do for themselves, please allow them to, but guide them towards that and resist carrying them. So don't do things for them. You do want them to build the self-confidence in their abilities, but also know that it's okay to ask for help. Building their executive functioning. So what does that mean? Strengthening their executive functioning, will strengthen the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that's right up on our foreheads. That is the last to develop. This will help them manage their own behavior and feelings and increase their capacity to develop coping strategies. That is the part of the brain that allows us to measure, weigh, or postpone gratification and allow us to weigh pros and cons of doing an activity instead of just diving first because it feels right at the moment. Some powerful ways to build their executive functioning are establishing routines, modeling healthy social behaviors yourself, creating and maintaining supportive, reliable relationships around them, and providing opportunities for their own social connections. So having them involved in something such as a club. Other ways, creative play, using their imagination. Board games especially is good for impulse control, especially when they're younger. Wait your turn. Planning, working on memory, mental flexibility, the ability to shift thoughts from an alternative, better pattern of thought if the situation arises. So that's board games. For example, games that involve memory. The shopping game is one that is easy to play. Everyone adds something to the shopping list. So I will start. I went shopping and I bought a puppy. And then the next person will say, I went shopping and I bought a puppy and a bike. And that will keep going on and on. And the winner is the person before the last person who messes it up, essentially. Exercise is known to promote resilience. Getting up, getting active, doing something fun. Giving them the opportunity to think and act independently. If they disagree with you and tell you why you're wrong, there is a plus side. They're, they are using their executive functioning skills, which is positive. Instead of getting upset because they're questioning your authority, have a discussion. You can still say at the end of the day, I am the parent and this is what we need to do now, but I appreciate your perspective. And maybe, just maybe, they're right and you can both reach a compromise. Provide opportunities for them to make their own decisions. Okay, so one is also encouraging regular mindfulness practice. Mindfulness creates structure and functional changes in the brain that support a healthy response to stress. It strengthens calming and rational prefrontal cortex and reduces activity in the instinctive impulse part of the brain called the amygdala. It also strengthens the connections between prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So your prefrontal cortex is able to control the center that just wants you to go, go, go and do things. When this connection is strong, there's a calming prefrontal cortex will help you make more decisions and behaviors that are conducive to a positive outcome. So just to break this up, because everyone has been sitting for a while, we're all going to stand up and do a little mindfulness exercise. Thank you very much.
Welcome to another mindful moment with Nick. This mindful moment is called the balloon.
Oh. Okay. Technical difficulties. Give me one moment. I think.
Man practice.
Okay, sorry.
Start by standing in a space behind your desk and create a wide space between your feet. Begin by taking a deep breath in through your nose and then slowly breathe out through your mouth. On your next deep breath in, roll your arms upwards to float over your head as if you're holding a giant balloon. Pause for a count of 2. Then bend your knees slightly and slowly sigh the breath out through your mouth. As your head rolls forward, your vertebrae fold down one by one and your hands drop down towards your feet. Pause here for 3 breaths. Allow your body to relax. Gently nod your head yes and no and allow your neck to relax. After your 3 breaths, breathe in, pushing through your feet, straighten the legs and roll up the spine until you're standing tall. Bringing your arms up until they are floating overhead. Now repeat this practice 2 more times. Bring your awareness to your breath. Notice its depth or shallowness. Notice your heartbeat, its strength and speed. Take this sense of relaxation and calm with you into the rest of your day. This has been a Mindful Moment with Nick. For more mindful moments, check out our Mindful Moments book or our Peak website.
Okay. So hopefully we all feel relatively calm. Imagine starting your morning like this. So we wake up, maybe we're late for work, we're late for school, and rush, 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 rush. It takes 3 minutes to stop and pause and do this. And you actually step into your day with a more positive attitude. This is true for children as well. You can teach mindfulness at a very young age. When a child is throwing a tantrum because they're upset, once they are calm enough to hear you, because sometimes they just need to let that out, we'll sit next to them and then just practice breathing. The first few times you do it in front of them, they will just look at you like, what in the world? But you do that every time that they're upset. Before they're fully calm, they're still you just sit next to them and you take deep breaths. I will attest to you that it does work. I have a 2.5-year-old who also on occasion throws tantrums. And when you're like, breathe, he'll it starts with the really angry breaths, but he eventually calms down. And and you have to keep his attention long enough to calm, so we count to 10. But then he's at a much better place and we can move forward, as opposed to if you stay in your state of anger. Distraction works, but you still have all that pent up energy. The breathing just helps recenter. And as the child gets older, these actually help recenter you so that you can move forward with a more positive attitude. Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay. We are almost, do we have time for this? I talked about exercise before. Exercise strengthens and reorganizes the brain to make it more resilient to stress. So one of the ways it does this is by increasing neurochemicals that can calm the brain in times of stress. So it's not that you are stopping to exercise while you're stressed. You have exercised, so your brain now doesn't respond to stress in quite the same way, with quite the same intensity. Anything that gets kids moving is excellent, but of course, if you can make it fun, pretty much grants you and makes you the hero. Exercise doesn't have to look like going to the gym or going outside and walking in 120-degree weather. It can be 30-minute dance parties at home, putting on a YouTube channel, that there are so many out there, one of the benefits of technology, and you get up and you dance. It's really hard to be mad when you're dancing. You start off mad, and especially if you have that expression, especially if your child has that expression. You'll start off mad and I really don't want to do this, and at the end of the day, they're laughing at themselves for trying to dance and be upset at the same time. So we will start with I won't show this whole video, but it's very cute, and so just to break up the monotony.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana.
I won't follow the whole thing, but I'd like you to notice almost everyone here is smiling. Okay. And I'd also like to point out that the kids don't really look like they have very much, but they are happy and they are resilient. Little backstory just for interest's sake. These kids are part of an orphanage in Uganda, and they've been posting these videos and have become internet sensations. And so recently traveled to, I think, what is it? One of those shows in the UK where you, Next Best, yes, UK's Got Talent, and they won, and the judges were so happy that usually you have to wait until the end of the show to tell them that they've made it to the next round, and one of the judges couldn't help themselves and pressed the big button, and there was confetti and everyone was happy. Little simple things like that increase your endorphins, build your resilience, and even when you're going through a tough time right now, it helps to break it up with a little bit of joy. And who knew exercise can be that way of doing it too? It doesn't have to be difficult. Building feelings of competence and a sense of mastery. So it is important to use positive words when we are speaking to our children. You're a superstar when it comes to trying hard. Point out what they're good at, even if it's just trying hard. It doesn't always have to be winning. You don't have to be the winner, but you tried hard. You're good at trying hard. Guess what? They'll know and internalize that I tried hard. And the next task that seems difficult, they're more likely to put in the extra effort because that becomes how they identify themselves. I try hard. You've got what it takes. Keep going. You'll get there. Nurture optimism. So the brain, optimism has been found to be one of the key characteristics of resilient people. The brain can be rewired to be more optimistic through experiences it is exposed to. So if you have a small human who tends to look at the glass as being half empty, show them a different point of view. So that doesn't mean invalidating how they feel. Acknowledge their view of the world and then introduce them to a different one. Teach them to reframe. The ability to reframe challenges in ways that feel less threatening is linked to resilience. Reframing is such a valuable skill to have. In times of difficulty or disappointment, it will help them focus on what they have rather than what they have lost. To build this skill, acknowledge their disappointment, then gently steer them away from looking at what the problem has cost them towards the opportunities it might have brought them. For example, if it is raining, which means that their sporting or the plans for that day have been canceled, I understand how disappointed you are about not playing today. I'd be disappointed too. What can we do because of the rain? It can be anything like, let's bake, let's snuggle and watch a show, let's read a book, make it fun. Even if they say something that's ridiculous, meet there somewhere in the middle, but reframe. It's not, woe is me, my whole day is ruined. We can do something else. And finally, model resilience. What that means is the small humans in your life will want to be just like you. And so they'll be watching everything that you do without pitching it about what they can cope with. Let them see how you deal with disappointment. Bringing them into your emotional world is appropriate in an appropriate way for their age. So if you are sad, it's okay to say, Mommy's sad today, but I'm still gonna get up and I'm going to do A, B, C, and I'm going to help feel better. Or even though I'm sad today, I know I'll be better tomorrow, so I'm gonna keep going. It's important for them to see that bad things do happen even to their superheroes, but their superheroes keep going. So they know it's okay to have that emotion, to have that disappointment, to have that stress, and they'll keep, but they can keep moving forward. Lastly, what can we do to build resilience in our community? Support responsive relationships for children and adults, strengthen core skills for planning, adapting, and achieving goals, and reduce sources of stress in the lives of children and families. So safer neighborhoods, parks to go and play in, activities that they can be a part of, but also that families can be a part of. Support families from single mothers, support them in raising their children or families in need. In order for us to be safe, our neighbors also need to be safe, and it fosters just a healthy community for all of us in the long run. Okay, thank you. I think I went a little bit over time. My apologies. But I welcome any questions, and I was told to pass the mic. Oh, perfect. So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hands, and I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. My question has to do with the increasing rates of suicide attempts and suicide even before the pandemic.
Yes.
What's going on? What do you think?
I think it's multifactorial. I think part of it is social media and children being involved in social media and having the opportunity of it builds, everyone puts their best foot forward when they're posting. So it makes you feel like you don't, for example, for adolescents, you have to look a certain way. You have to have the right shoes. Before, when we were in school, myself included, it's okay, maybe that one person, you always had that kid who had everything. But you also had your friends who maybe dressed like you, and you didn't feel like the only one who didn't have $2,000 pocket money. What social media makes it look like is that everyone has that except you. So that's part of the reason. Feelings of loneliness have also increased. So even though we're all interconnected via our phones, we don't talk to each other one-on-one and look at each other's faces. We don't do activities together anymore. So you feel like you're kind of walking in this world alone. I feel like that is one part of it. There's probably a lot more, other things that I'm not thinking of right now, but those are the things that I see most often going on. Just access to more without having a center. And then also that relationship with a trusted adult. We all have to go out and work now, and maybe we're not spending as much time as we would like with our families, which is understandable. So for children not having that one person who they feel like they can go to when they're younger, because you have to put your kids in daycare because you have to be at work. What I have found as to counter that, though, is it's not always the quantity of time that you spend, but the quality of time that you spend. So when you are with your kids, really helping them, letting them know that they're there and you're focused on them, doing activities where your phone as well is not there. And even though that there will be resistance to begin with, if it's a fun activity, it actually helps build their sense of community. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Unfortunately, I had the wrong time for your lecture. I'm so disappointed because what I heard was just excellent. Do you have notes on your lecture this evening, or will you post anything on the web with some of your notes?
So yes, I was told that this is being recorded. So in a couple of weeks, it will be available at the UCR website. And so, but thank you for the compliment. Thank you.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I think one of the reasons why I have a learning different nonprofit, and one of the reasons is that no one's talking about it. I think it's, suicide doesn't happen in social situations. And so one of the things about, as a middle school teacher, before I was a middle school teacher, and I realized that kids were comparing their insides to other people's outsides. And so we would do things like have duck, or heads up, 7-Up. And so if a kid was being bullied because they were playing with My Little Pony, what we would do is I'd be like, heads up, 7-Up, and how many of you are still playing with My Little Pony? And it'd be the 7 kids. And instead of feeling badly for playing My Little Pony, they'd be like, okay, we got to start a My Little Pony club. And the same thing with kids who are crying themselves to sleep. I had a kid who was crying themselves to sleep, and then I did a heads up, 7-Up. 100% of the kids in the last 30 days had been crying themselves to sleep. So now they turn to each other and go, what are you crying about? Rather than thinking they're the only one crying. But I think the first thing is awareness that these things are happening. The other thing, the question I have though is, I love what you said, I love how you explained it all, but my issue, I think some of the core problems from being a teacher to being, having a learning center is that I think the root problem is school. We're not teaching kids social emotional learning like we should, and we're not recognizing neurodiversity's differences. I know myself, I was severely depressed, illiterate until I was 15, but people just labeled me as disordered. So I'm wondering what you think about the social model versus the medical model. Do you have any, and also how the role of what teachers can do to help reduce the trauma that kids are experiencing?
Thank you for that question. That is an amazing question. So yes, to go back to, I'll touch in the beginning, the sense of loneliness is really difficult, and knowing that there are so that's the positive side of social media, right? You can find community in not everyone, or there are other people who feel the way that you feel. In terms of labeling, I kind of teeter between is it bad or is it not bad. Labeling, and if it gets you the assistance that you need, can be positive. But having a label in and of itself, we are not just one thing. I am wearing black shoes. I am wearing a blue top. I am a doctor. I am a mother. I am a daughter. I was sad yesterday. I am happy today. And so I think that we have to reframe how children, you're not an absolute. Don't identify your whole self and your whole being by a situation or a feeling. I feel like that is important. I do think that schools should be responsible to a certain extent in helping to support children and teach them mindfulness. I have learned that it takes a village, right? So schools are responsible, but it starts at home, and when they go out into the coaches, like I mentioned, the coaches are there. I don't think that we should put onus on just one entity, because everyone, it is held by it's run by humans, and so we're all going to fail at some point, right? So I do think that I would love to see more mindfulness being taught in schools. For example, PE was removed, and then I think people are realizing that it's important, and music. All those activities actually increase mindfulness. I love the game that you said where it's identifying that you're not the only one, but also the conversations that you're having with your child at home, or the coaches, if you notice that one child is not doing as well. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to be a great performer, but find out what you are good at and amplify that. There was something else that you asked. I don't.
The social model in terms of what you kind of addressed, and also trauma, like
What can I do about trauma?
Because I went through trauma. My ACE score was high. I knew that look for trauma. I did my thesis on the fact that a lot of teachers don't have high ACE scores, and so they may not even have the awareness that a child is. We tend to discipline depression. Whereas in my class, I didn't have discipline problems because I assumed that there was something wrong, not that there was something wrong with the child.
Right. Thank you. Actually, thank you. That is very important, because a lot of kids with behavioral issues are actually just being mislabeled. There's something else going on, and you don't naturally know how to express yourself. That comes with emotional intelligence, and you have to learn it from somewhere. Automatic reaction, which again, toddlers tend to have, when they feel emotions that aren't positive, they lash out. And so they need to be taught to rechannel that somewhere else. I feel like it's very important to educate our educators before they get to a classroom and let them know what ACEs are. Believe it or not, not every doctor has heard about ACEs. And we know for a fact that it doesn't just affect your mental health, it also affects your physical health. High ACEs have been associated in children with obesity, with asthma, in adults with different types of cancer, with heart disease. So yes, it is something that is lacking in our system, and I think that it's very, very important to start, just like all the trainings and licensings that you need to be able to identify trauma. And before you label, this is the one bad label, as a bad kid, get to know them and figure out why they're acting that way. For children especially, there's usually a root cause.
Yeah, so when talking about resiliency, when you're trying to inculcate resiliency to kids who have different personalities and they react different, they have emotional responses, what will be a good balance so that you don't seem unfair yet not too soft on the other one?
For instance, one is very sensitive and one is very hard-headed.
So there's no one method fits all. Find out what the hard-headed one really likes to do, and that becomes their treat. Everyone gets to pick a treat, so it's a choice. It's a balancing act, but also learning that not everything is always fair is part of resilience. So one day you get to pick and choose the activity, and the other day the other person gets to pick and choose the activity in terms of building resilience. Does that answer the question? You kind of have to tailor it to the individual child, and I don't think that there's like an easy answer for that. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we got another question over here.
You mentioned that with the trauma, with ACE and incident, that witnessing violence in the home, is that violence between people, real people, or violence on television as well, on the screen?
Both in different ways. Especially depending on how young the child is, they're not always able to separate reality from the screen. And so those cortisol levels are increased, and those affect the brain sometimes just as much, depending on the child, as witnessing violence. But it's a different level when you don't feel safe at home, because when you're watching something on the screen, you can turn it off and you can run to someone and you can get into your safe place. But if the place that you're supposed to be safe doesn't feel safe anymore, that's a long-term stress. That's when it becomes chronic and can affect you.
We have a question here.
As you're building their confidence, and you're seeing them on a spectrum, and you're seeing little signs early on, at what point do you actually seek resources, and what would those resources be? Do you talk to the pediatricians, or are you going more like psychology route when you see like early sort of signs?
I say it's never too early to ask for help. Even when they're a toddler, just tantrums, ask other parents, ask the pediatrician for resources. And I also want to destigmatize going to therapy. Therapy is just asking someone to help teach you how to process the feelings that you're having so that it can come, it doesn't have a negative outcome and you can deal with it in a better way. So in the future, if you do go through those difficult times, you know how to process it. And as a parent, you can't know everything. Even as a pediatrician, I don't know everything. There are other people that I ask questions all the time too. So I would say definitely start with, a pediatrician is a good place to go, but definitely also seek a referral, especially if you're seeing signs that are making you ask the question. I feel like that's your answer.
And last little bit, can you just go into a little bit about the role of nutrition? I understand genetics and environmental factors, but how much of nutrition actually plays a role with mental disorders in children, especially if they have poor nutrition habits to begin with, like picky eaters?
So, picky eaters is slightly different from just unhealthy habits, period. Picky eaters, as a child, the advice that I give parents is make it fun. Make them help you make the food. They're more likely to eat it. Make the food fun shapes, and it depends on the age of the child. The goal is hopefully if you start young enough and you keep having the food in front of them, so it's not just this thing that they only see once a week and so they can say no once a week, but not getting into a fight and, oh, you are not going to do XYZ unless you eat this right now. It's like, oh, you don't feel like eating the broccoli right now. So you have broccoli and you have chicken and you have maybe a little bit of your carbs, and you eat a little bit of your carbs and you eat a little bit of the chicken and taste the broccoli. And you don't taste the broccoli. Okay, so later on when you want a snack, we'll revisit the broccoli instead of going in and getting the cookie or the ice cream. And also having treats. In terms of how does nutrition affect mental health long-term, the studies are still going on, but we do know that Unhealthy diets make you feel more sluggish, make you feel more sleepy. So it does affect your health. Vegetables give you more energy, give you more clarity. You feel lighter, and that can start even from a young age. We used to think that obesity and diabetes way back in the day was a disease of older people, and now it's starting, type 2 diabetes specifically, is starting in younger kids. So all these do play a factor in mental health because your body needs the right nutrients as building blocks for everything to function properly. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one, but if you are eating only carbs and not eating vegetables, that is going to affect you. I will say this though, what your kids are going to see what you eat and are going to want to mirror what you eat. And it is a little unfair for you to eat the chips and the Cheetos in front of them and then expect them to eat the veggies. So I would say try to have healthy alternatives in the home and mirror, as an example, what you would like them to eat. And it's an ongoing process, so you continue to encourage it. It's building it over time. And it's not because I start incorporating veggies into our meals today that by next week you'll be eating the veggies.